Hi, everyone, and welcome to Poison Seeps, how toxicity erodes trust, degrades player experience, hurts the bottom line, and frankly damages a lot of other things. I'm Mike Pappas. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Modulate, which does real-time voice moderation for games, including Riot Games, Rec Room, and a bunch of other studios. I'm here with an amazing panel to talk to you about the impact of toxicity. So I'm mostly going to be shutting up and letting them all talk. So to kick off, folks, if we can just do a quick introduction of who you are and maybe what your favorite game was growing up.
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Eve Crevichet. I'm the executive director of Take This, which is a mental health advocacy, training, research, and consulting nonprofit that works in the game industry and the game community. We're 10 years old. And my favorite, my favorite video game from when I was young was Worms, which I played with my husband when we were first dating. And it was the first game he taught me to play. And we had so much fun playing that game, like so much fun. So, yeah.
Hi, my name is Elspeth Eastman. I've been a Twitch streamer for almost about 9 years, a voice actor for 13, and a lifelong gamer. I'm really excited to share some experience as not just a streamer, but as a consumer of games and as an avid player and fan of a lot of stuff. So it's very hard for me to decide a favorite game, but I think I have to land on Day of the Tentacle.
I'm Daniel Kelly. I'm the Director of Strategy and Operations for the Center for Technology and Society at the Anti-Defamation League. We were founded in 1913 with a mission to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and secure justice and fair treatment to all. My team at the Center for Technology and Society focuses on that same mission, but in digital spaces, from online games to social media to internet infrastructure. And my favorite game as a young person was definitely, I would go with Baldur's Gate 2, which is something I play with my brother a lot. And we're trying to figure out how we get time off to play 3 together in August. So that's something that's coming up.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And I realized I didn't give my favorite game. I feel like I owe you all that. My friends growing up could not understand why I was good at Super Monkey Ball. It was a game we would never play, but for whatever reason, I was good at it, and none of the rest of my friend group was. So it was the one game that I got to win, and I'll take that every once in a while. So,
As you should. As you should.
All right, so to kick off the discussion here, I want to ask you each the same sort of question that I get asked all the time by folks who haven't been as steeped in sort of the toxicity of this space. Is toxicity really that big of a problem? Can't you just mute the people? Or, even if it is a problem, can't you just quickly find things with keyword searches or whatever else and just get it done? Why is this such a big deal? Eve, I'm sure you have thoughts.
It turns out we do research on this. And actually my research director is sitting right there. We have found in our research, and this is backed up by lots of other stuff, and in part this is including data that we got and were able to work with from Modulate AI, which was really exciting, that toxicity is a problem. It is the severe toxicity, really, really disruptive, true hate speech and behavior is very small in number, but very loud in impact. And but what we have found based on the data that we have looked at is that it sets a baseline for normalizing certain types of speech and behavior, so that we see the impacts of that really, really extreme behavior reverberate through all of the player base and normalize harmful interactions across huge whole gaming communities in ways that like reset expectations around behavior in really harmful ways.
And I know you had a couple of slides of some of the research that you've been doing on this, so I wanted to briefly bring these up and give you the opportunity to speak to some of this.
Yeah, for sure. So this is this is work that we're doing with the funding from the Department of Homeland Security in partnership with the Middlebury Institute, Center on Counterterrorism. And this is in some initial an initial player survey, we found that lots and lots and lots of people witness harassment, even if they're not the direct target, although the direct target numbers are unfortunately and inappropriately high. And that witnessing number, that's where the normalization happens. That's the area of concern. And that's what makes us all just kind of use that shorthand of toxicity in games. And this is, I talked about this on Tuesday, actually. So this is data from a survey of people who make games. So these are people who work in this industry. And the survey found that 59% of respondents have experienced harassment by players. So this is like a systemic issue, and 92% have witnessed that harassment. So nearly everyone who works in games has seen harassment of their colleagues. So just pointing to how much of an impact it has across the whole ecosystem.
Awesome. I'm going to just quickly go there. So Elspeth, would you like to share your?
Oh gosh, yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the main issues with toxicity in gaming is that not just that it hurts people, but like you said, it has that ripple effect, right? And speaking as someone who has streamed and played these games in front of a lot of people, it's almost better for the gaming devs to look at their game subjectively and say, well, this person is actually like saying these things about our game, and they're trying to have a good time, and it looks like our player base is actively affecting that. Like it will bring down anybody's mood so fast. It will bring down the energy so fast. I think it puts a strain on people, like when they do witness it. I feel any group, any cooperative effort in a game can really just tank, depending on if someone is being a sore winner, sore loser, or just a sore human being. So as a person who has played games and had it happen to me live on camera, it's very difficult to compose yourself when that does happen to you, because you don't want to affect the people that are watching. You don't want to affect anybody else. And it's sometimes very difficult to mute and move on, because I definitely feel that words have a very sinking effect on us. And that can really, really hurt your self-esteem in the moment. I don't have any statistics to share. I just have personal experience. But gosh, I feel like it's just been, from my very first ever live game, Xbox Live game, little me is like, yeah, Halo. And I'm ready to get on voice chat for the first time. And it was just like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Not at all, and it's that first hurdle of wow, maybe some people suck. Like they're really mean for no reason. So yeah, it's definitely a problem, and something that I think we can work to address for sure.
And I think something you're kind of pointing to too is, the immersiveness of games makes games so powerful, but it also makes this hurt that much harder. And I've seen some studies on this too, but folks that are saying, hey, yeah, I'm getting kind of terrorized, I'm getting harassed in these games, but also I desperately want to keep playing them, and I want to keep, participating with these communities, because it's an opportunity for me to express my identity in a new way, or an opportunity to bond with people I don't otherwise get to bond with. And so it's not just that it's a toxic space, it's that it's a toxic space that simultaneously draws us in for more.
Yeah, I actually recharacterize that a little bit, because it's not just a toxic space that draws us in for more. It's actually a positive space that invites us in and provides benefit and provides social connection. And that's why we have to solve the problem, because this is a wonderful space. It is you do what you do for a reason.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So many people gain so much out of gaming. And I think that's really important to set that baseline.
Really good clarification. It's a space tainted by toxicity. Yes. It's not fundamentally a space of toxicity. Right. It's fundamentally a space.
I don't think we'd have a convention if it was, fundamentally toxic, right? But yeah, so it's absolutely.
PAX East is happening this week. That's a place. That's such a celebratory place.
Yeah.
Daniel, yeah.
Yeah, I guess just responding a little bit to what you said, Elspeth, I feel like one of the things that we're trying to do at ADL is up until about 2019, I feel like there were so many anecdotes of people with experiences like yourselves, right? And people who were saying hate and harassment is everywhere in games, but there weren't really any hard numbers behind it. And so what we've done over the last 4 years is we've done a nationally representative survey of hate and harassment and positive social experiences in online multiplayer games. To really get some quantitative numbers from the perspective of targets, from the perspective of people like you who are targeted in these spaces, and to put some numbers behind them. We found in our last survey, 86% of American adults experience harassment in online multiplayer games. 77% experience severe harassment. So these are things like stalking, sustained harassment, violent threats. So the problem is massive, right? And I think one of the things that we're putting out next week is a new report that looks at, so we've done the work where we've quantified the problem of hate and harassment in online multiplayer games. And we did interviews with leaders in the industry to talk to them about, at the same time that this is a huge problem, there are people doing good work in this industry, and we want to understand what works. And we want to understand why the good people doing work is not having a greater impact on the numbers that we see every year have increased for the last 4 years since 2019. And so we did interviews with people, and two of the things they really pointed to in terms of obstacles getting in the way of these things being more the trust and safety work being more impactful were, one, that the budgets that trust and safety teams have at game companies are minuscule compared to the size of even the biggest game companies. And second, that the priorities for trust and safety, for content moderation, are out of whack with the priorities for the game company as a whole, right? Safety may be the priority of the trust and safety team, but is it the priority of the engineering team, of the development team, of a whole swath of other teams, right? And if you're not centering safety, inclusion, trust and safety from the beginning of a game, you end up being totally unprepared, as the quote up here says, for the kinds of harassment that happen and occur in these spaces. So I think through research and advocacy, we're trying to shine a light on this space and to point to the fact that, I think we're laughing and we're having a good time, but like the experience you have is not okay, right? It's not. It shouldn't be the norm in these spaces, right? And I think we really need to shift that.
Yeah, I am encouraged to see just, in like tomorrow morning, the Fair Play Alliance is releasing their digital playbook for digital thriving, which is a design tool. And Polaris Game Retreat last week released their Kind Games online multiplayer for pro-social multiplayer design playbook. And like these things are really emerging from influential places inside the industry. But the culture shifting is incremental and very slow. And the game industry is probably 10 years behind, say, social media. I hear this all the time from folks in the trust and safety space, that it's like we have a lot of ground to make up to understand what's going on and then like wrap our heads around it.
I mean, I think something to build on a little bit there in what you're saying is these projects that you mentioned, right? The Fair Play Alliance, these other things, they're amazing and important resources that are done in the spare time of people who care about this industry, right? They're not funded in a huge way. The Fair Play Alliance is an amazing group of really powerful and passionate people that does not get significant funding from the industry in the way that it really should. And so I think that's a piece of the culture change is to not have it be not to be so reliant on people putting in extra time, but to really shift where the C-level's priorities are.
And so that's part of why we're here to have this conversation is, of course, there's a lot of reasons to care about resolving toxicity in games beyond just the monetary cost. But it is a language that executives understand, and that can certainly drive a lot of really impactful decision making. Now, when I'm talking with studios about this, I often hear from folks that are less sort of versed in the sort of community spaces, concern of, hey, maybe the most toxic people are also the ones who are playing the games so much. And so that's our whales. And so if we start cracking down on toxicity, we're going to actually end up bringing in less income. I really want to, hear each of your thoughts about that sort of line of thinking. But beforehand, I also wanted to share a recent research report that came from Constance Steinkuhler. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing her name. And she was looking into this specific question and found that games with significant toxicity in them were making something like 54% less money from actual in-game purchases than games that were recognized as being safer, less toxic spaces, which is, puts a finger on something we all already knew, but gives us some really powerful statistics to share it. So I wanted to share that in particular here, but would love to hear from each of you as well, kind of your thoughts on, how do we assess the impact on, the financial well-being of games from trying to attack that toxicity problem?
Yeah. I mean, games are can be difficult places to be in, online games. And if you make them less difficult to be in, then more people feel comfortable participating. It's pretty simple, actually. Like that piece of the puzzle is really straightforward. It means, but the solution, like the process to get there, is actually not simple. There's a lot more.
I think it goes back to that cultural shift, right? Where it's like there's so much of that old club of like, nay, we don't want you here. No, we're going to make fun of you. And it's going to be difficult to get over that, I feel like that's going to be like the next mountain that we really climb is, okay, gaming is for everyone. Anybody, absolutely anyone can game and should be able to game, and should feel included. And, to piggyback off of that, it should be fun. It should be fun. And if the game is not fun, what's going on there? What's going on there, and why can't it be for everybody?
And that's almost one of the very few, I'm going to say, blessings of COVID to a degree, is when we were all quarantined for that time, people turned to games. People really came to understand the power of games. And, my elderly grandmother, who could barely, pick up a phone, was logging into Among Us to try to play with all of her grandkids. Like the demographic sort of awareness of games from that has really been unprecedented. And we've seen that's been sticky. That's something that I think is really important to understand, is those people haven't left. Now that they've had that first gaming experience and realized, oh, it's not this, mystical, crazy place that I don't know what to do with. Like, this is actually fun. And we now have a much wider pool of people who really want to participate in this space if we can give them an opportunity to.
I mean, everybody is a broad term, right? I would say everybody except like white supremacists, right? I think our study showed that, in the last year or so, the presence of white supremacist ideologies that players are hearing in online multiplayer games went from 8 to 20% of adults in the United States, right? And so, I think at the same time we're trying to build inclusive and important spaces, there needs to be a line, I think,
yes,
that is drawn, right? And that's part of it. And I think in terms of the business argument, right, I think one of the stats we have from our research is that since 2019, the number of players that have quit games because of hate and harassment has increased year over year. So it started with 19% of adult gamers in 2019. In the last year, it was 33% of gamers who said, I quit games because they're toxic, because I don't feel safe in those spaces, right? And I think, to me, that's, when I talk to companies about the problem and about what they should do, that's an important stat, because unlike social media, where the customers are really the advertisers, right? For games, I think the players are still absolutely the customers, right? They're actually absolutely the people who have the buying power. And if they're leaving your games because you're not addressing these things, that's a huge cost.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel, to build off of what you were kind of saying, it's for almost everyone, not quite for everyone. I think
we will not tolerate that.
Absolutely. And part of that gets back to as well, like, how do we define what is welcome? And what is toxicity? We have various games with different codes of conduct that try and say things like, hey, don't be an asshole, which we all kind of laugh about and say, yeah, that would be nice. But it turns out some people need guidance. And this was part of the work that we had done with Take This, was looking into how do kids vary in their behavior compared to adults? And what are some of the, gateway behaviors that you see younger players exhibiting as they come into a new platform and they see, hey, all of the pros in this space are saying these really horrible things to each other, but I'm a kid, I don't know that it's horrible yet. I'm going to adopt all of those behaviors because I want to be like that person who's so skilled at this game, and no one's going to tell me that I'm doing the wrong thing. And I still think, one of the most jarring examples of toxicity that we've found detected in some of the games that we work with was a kid who couldn't have been older than 7 years old singing over and over, "N-word in my butthole." In a very, very numerous problems with that, but in particular, to me, it really highlighted, to this kid, butthole and the N-word were exactly the same kind of thing. They were both things that I'm not supposed to say, haha, I'm going to try and push the envelope. And the kid was just experimenting. They had no idea what they were actually doing in that space. But they certainly were making a lot of people uncomfortable without having that intention. So I think trying to figure out what is truly, that toxicity that is sufficiently innate to the person that we say that person is not welcome here, versus what is toxicity that is a result of miscommunication or misunderstanding or people just learning the wrong habits, where we can and should be trying to re-educate those players and help them to engage in these communities in a more inclusive way. I think that's a challenging problem.
It is a challenging problem, but it also is solvable, eminently solvable. And because we know, a behavior is a function of a person and their environment, right? And that's what you're trying to say, is that this research is really demonstrating that kids are learning the behaviors, testing them out, and then if there's not negative feedback around those behaviors, then they escalate as adults into intent, right? And so we at Take This, we take pains to draw the line from what the makeup of your studio, the culture of your studio, the people and the voices in your studio shape the design decisions, the design, the community decisions, the marketing decisions, the decisions about where to invest money and how, which then shape the player experience. And there is a direct line from who is in the room and how they're being heard to how that plays out in your game. Yeah. And it's so important that we build from the right foundations to get to the right result. Yeah. And it's an all above situation, all of the above. There's not one silver bullet here. There's really good trust and safety tools and moderation. And I think Modulate is doing a really cool job in there, really. And really good design, community design, game content, and all of those decisions, and studio makeup that makes it sustainable.
And community engagement and communication too.
100%.
Those are super.
Which is, I'm sure you see play out all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Gosh. It's difficult. It's difficult because when you see people behaving in this way, it's so hard not to look at it as like, what are they doing? Don't they realize, common sense? Don't be mean, look at this from someone else's perspective. Put yourself in their shoes. They might actually be really affected by this, but it also might be a 7-year-old. So you have no idea. It's very difficult to look at a chat scrolling by and be like, what is wrong with this person? But they're behind that shield almost of anonymity, right? They're behind this well, I can say whatever I want. And I think I absolutely agree. I feel like there's a responsibility there on the people making the game, maybe not just trust and safety, right? Maybe the people that are in this culture, because it's a culture that is drawing these people in. You look at a first-person shooter, you look at a multiplayer shooter, and arguably those are the games that I have found have the most aggression and violence and people making threats. And one reason I absolutely do not play with voice chat on my stream is simply because I've seen so many people, they have someone just scream in their ear, or they catch it live, or again, it affects everyone. It affects the viewers, it affects the streamer, and then it affects the team as well. Yeah. So I keep voice chat off for that reason. Yeah. And it's hard. It's so hard to learn that lesson of like, you just don't know. You just don't know if you can trust someone, right? You don't know if you can trust your teammates at that point. And that's where we need to build that foundation, right? Where it's like, we need to just look at the people who are doing well. We need to look at the people who are trying to coordinate and trying to be a team. And I find that the report feature in any multiplayer online game is absolutely something that I use every single time. Anytime somebody is harassing me or a teammate, I want to make sure that I am heard. I want to make sure like, hey, so-and-so username was really griefing us. And personally, I think there should be consequences to that. I think that, I was susceptible. I used to play League of Legends, and that is one of the most salty games in the universe. It is absolutely so, it's very difficult to rein yourself in when you're part of it. When you're part of it and you're like, oh my God, I can feel myself getting angry. I can feel myself getting angry with this game. And I was like, I have to step away. This is not who I am.
I want to interject because you called out first-person shooters, and I don't mean to cause an angry mob, but we're doing a talk tomorrow morning on extremist behavior in video games, and we're going to talk specifically about first-person shooters, among other types of content. So 10 a.m. tomorrow. Rachel. I do. I mean, I think, listen, it's absolutely promotion, but for a reason. This is topical. Yeah. And I really do think we need to start interrogating games are cultural commentary, and they also shape culture. Yes. And we have to take that seriously. Yeah.
I mean, I think the experience you talked about with just like, of course you don't turn the mic on in a game, right? Like anyone who I know who's a woman, right? Like, exactly. Like a woman, a people of color, anyone who belongs to a marginalized identity, it just doesn't, like the norm is not to speak in those spaces. And the industry should not be accepting that as the norm for what these spaces you're creating are, right? You should be able to speak in that space, right? Yeah. And not be targeted. And I think that's such a, it's great that you all are creating technology to try to address that. I just think it's important to call out some of the norms that have become so part of, like, of course I wouldn't say that I'm Jewish in an online multiplayer game, because then I would be targeted because of that, right?
It's amazing how much of it just gets like, oh, well, just mute and move on. I've had people tell me, as I'm streaming, as I'm playing this, well, it's really not that big of a deal. Like, you don't know what that feels like. I'm sorry. It's very difficult to describe how it feels to be dehumanized when you're just trying to work together for fun. Yeah. It's awful.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, to build on what you were saying before, Elspeth, about like, it's great that you hit that report button every time. So few people do. And you doing that work, it's really important to help signal boost what's happening here and bring attention to it. But in the same sense of, people trying to dehumanize, and this is a little bit of, a plug for our particular approach, I don't think it should be on you. I don't think it should be on you to have to hit the report button. I've been
playing this game for years. Why do I have to do this work? I'm sick of this. Like, ugh.
Exactly.
Italian hands.
So I know we're getting close to time here. I want to do one final pass and just sort of say, I know it goes by so fast. One kind of quick pass, maybe a minute or so each, and just if you're talking to folks within a studio today and you're trying to give them the ammunition they need to go to their execs, to go to their team and say, this is a problem we need to target, what information do you have for folks that they can use there?
I actually reframe it a little bit, because the game industry has been attacked so much and by media, by politicians, with moral panic. And like, the thing is that games are not bad. Games are really a force for good for most people, most of the time. And we do know that by and large, games don't cause violence and they aren't addictive. Like by and large, that data seems to be there. So I say, listen, we want to be very precise in talking about the thing that is the problem versus the things that are not the problem, and recognize that both and of games, and recognize the amazing, wonderful things that games have brought to the world. Because I don't, like, the game industry is not an evil monolith, and this is not a thing where it's like, games bad, games bad. I don't like that narrative. I reject it. And so that's I really want that to be clear in the way that we talk about it.
Yeah, gosh, I agree. I feel like I have so much more to say, so I'm like, just collect your thoughts really fast. It's definitely, God, it's such a huge beast to tackle, but I really feel like we can make just a very chipping away sort of difference. But I think if I were to approach someone and say, hey, this is really what you're missing out on here, there's a massive market of people that have never played a game, or massive people that they're like, I don't really play games. And once they learn how much fun it is, once they learn, like, actually, I really enjoy this, there's money to be made there, right? And if you're right, like, if money's the thing that people understand, look at how much money you could be making. Like mobile games make a crap ton of money, and a lot more people play mobile games, surprisingly, than like console or computer. And it's bizarre how much they're really missing out on this market. So make your game inclusive and let people feel like they can come in for the first time and have a good time. And you probably will see results.
And then if you don't, then the government steps in, right? So two things, right? So I would say one is, we have 4 years at this point of data that points to all sorts of different aspects of hate and harassment, extremism in online games. I've heard from folks in the industry have taken our data and used it to talk to stakeholders to present to them, hey, this is from a third party, has done a bunch of different work here, and you can present it to stakeholders to show them the scope and the nature of the problem. And then, my first comment is that, I think there's an urgency to this, because I think regulation is coming, has come, will specifically target the games industry in the future. And so I think at this point, I think it's still the game industry's prerogative and the possibility of self-governance is still there, but I think the window on that is potentially closing, right? So I guess I would, I think carrot and stick in terms of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're at a critical juncture.
Yeah.
I think to tie that back to your point there, Eve, like the thesis statement here is games are great. We want more people to have access to them. We want more people to be able to participate in them. We want more people to get the benefits of these spaces. We want the game companies that are creating these wonderful spaces to be able to reap the rewards of creating those communities. But in order to do that, we need to be able to also see that there are these problems that are keeping people from being able to participate, from being able to have the experiences they're looking for, and be able to work towards, making us realize the full extent of what we have here. So that's all our time, folks. If you look at this QR code, we've got a lot of the research reports we mentioned there on the website, so feel free to check that out. And try and stick around in the breakout room if any of you have questions. So please feel free to come find us if you'd like to chat a little bit more about this.